All right, today we're going to zoom out. We're going to get away from all that day-to-day chaos and get that God's eye view of any process. And we're going to do it with a really simple but incredibly powerful tool, the SIPOC model. Let's jump in. So let me ask you this. Do you ever feel like you're just lost in a maze at work? You know your job, your desk, inside and out, but you have absolutely no idea how it connects to everything else. You're just stuck deep in the weeds, putting out fires all day while completely missing the bigger battle.
And that's the problem, right? You're missing that high-level perspective. You can only see what's right in front of you, while huge opportunities and maybe some big problems are flying by just out of sight. It is time to zoom out.
So how do you do that? Well, this is your new tactical map. It's called SIPOC. You know, a great commander doesn't need to be down in every single trench, but they absolutely must have a complete map of the battlefield. And for your business process, this is that map.
So, what exactly is it? SIPOC is just an acronym. It stands for Supplier, Input, Process, Output, and Customer. It's really a brilliantly simple way to get an entire, often really complex operation down on a single page, making sure that everyone on the team is looking at the same map. Now, here's the most important thing to get. This is not about mapping every single tiny detail. So many projects fail because they try to, boil the ocean. The whole point of a SIPOC is the exact opposite. It's to define your boundaries, your start and end points, and just get clear on the mission. It's all about setting the scope. Okay, so how do we actually build this map? Where do we start? Well, best practice says you start right smack in the middle with the P for process. If you define that core workflow first, everything else just kind of falls into place around it. You can see it right here. The process is basically the spine of our map. It's the central sequence of actions that turns all the stuff coming in into all the stuff going out. This is our anchor. And here's the golden rule. You want to keep your process description to just 5 to 7 high-level steps. That's it. And you might be asking, why so few? Well, because this map is for the big boss, right? It's for the project sponsor. They don't have time to read a 50-page manual. They just need to see the critical checkpoints. So just keep it really simple. Think in terms of simple verb-noun pairs. Things like gather information, enter data, process request. Each one is a clear, distinct phase of the journey. This high-level view is what stops us from getting lost in the weeds again. Okay, so with our core process mapped out, it's time to define the boundaries. And we do this in a very specific order. We're going to start by looking at the end results first, the outputs and customers, and then we'll work our way back to the beginning, the inputs and suppliers. I know it sounds a little backward, but we actually start at the end. What does this process produce? Those are your outputs. And who gets those outputs? Those are your customers. This step is huge because it forces you to ask a really critical question. Is the work we're doing actually reaching the right people? You'd be amazed how much work in big companies goes completely unused just because it doesn't have a clearly defined customer. And remember, customers aren't just the people buying the final product. You've got internal customers. That might be the next person down the line or the department that needs your report to do their job. And then you have your external customers, the ultimate end user. And guess what? You've got to make them both happy. Okay, now that we know where we're going, we can finally define our starting line. What things, what inputs do we need to make this whole process run? And who gives them to us? Those are your suppliers. This brings us to that timeless and very true saying, garbage in, garbage out. By identifying exactly what inputs you need and who's supplying them, you set up your first line of defense in quality control. It's proactive. Because think about it. Even the most perfect process in the world can't fix bad inputs. And inputs, they can be just about anything. It could be information from a form, raw materials from a vendor, a specific piece of equipment. It could even be people, people with the right skills, supplied by HR. Okay, so let's look at a completed map. In this example for a new patient, you can see how the patient is the supplier. They provide the input, which is the info form. The first process step is to gather that info. The output is a completed form, which then goes to the next customer, the registration desk. See how that works? The output of one step becomes the input for the next. It creates this perfect, seamless chain. So, the map is drawn. Let's talk about why it's so incredibly valuable. Why did we just do all this? What does this God's eye view actually give you in the real world?
Well, your SIPOC map gives you 4 critical advantages. First, you get clear project boundaries, which stops that dreaded scope creep before it can even start. Second, you get a full list of your key stakeholders, so you're not blindsided by some forgotten department halfway through the project. Third, it gets the entire team on the same page about how the process actually works, not just how they think it works. And finally, it gives you a framework to actually measure performance at each step.
But really, when you boil it all down, the true magic of the SIPOC model is that it does one thing better than almost anything else. It takes a messy, complicated operation and transforms it into a simple, shared understanding that lets you walk in on day one and talk about the business like you've been there for 10 years.
So, your tactical map is complete. You have the full view of the entire battlefield. The big question is no longer, what in the world is going on? The question now becomes, where does it hurt the most for the customer? Where do you strike first to make the biggest impact? And that is the perfect setup for what we're going to cover next. We're going to take this map and learn how to pinpoint exactly what is critical to quality for your customers. That way, you can go from just understanding the process to improving it with surgical precision. I'll see you then.